who am I is always a very interesting question, because the name that you are given when you are born is not necessarily the name of who you are, i.e. your spiritual self. And a lot of people change their name during their lifetime because it doesn't resonate with them and they go to something that works a bit better. So who you are really becomes a question of more who you are from a spiritual sense. And I went through a lot of my life questioning who I was, and got to a point where I realized I didn't have to have a name per se. It was more what I did spiritually that was important. And I was connected to Source, and Source explained to me that in the galaxies and in the universe there are a number of spiritual beings that are referred to by him, and the best way he could describe it was as keepers of light. Now, keepers of light are like roving librarians with microphones and video cameras. They go around and they record all the vibrational energies of a civilization and existence, and the way they do that is by incorporating into that existence. So they would incarnate into a human form and experience all the things that go on in a human form, and thereby recording it all in their DNA, which is a cosmic DNA. And they would spend hundreds, thousands of lives on a particular planet recording everything. In particular, like on Earth, I've had over 4,000 lives here. Can I remember them all? No, I can't. But I get flashes every now and then when it becomes relevant. And then that's just on this planet, and there's been other lives on other planets as well. So you get this like a massive library, and the library exists in not just visual images, not just sound recordings, but also in emotions, and every form of possible experience is recorded. And it was explained to me that that's who I was, and that was my function here. And when I got that explanation, it made my whole life make sense about why I hadn't fitted in with the mainstream population, and why I had things in my head that were totally in conflict with what the so-called experts were saying, particularly like with things like Egypt. Every time I read a book on Egyptology, I'd go, that's wrong, that the timings are wrong. And so then it came down to, well, understanding that who you are is more important than what your name is. And, you know, if we talk about God, well, God is a name that people on this planet have given that consciousness. God itself has no name and has no need for a name. So whenever people argue about whether it's God, or whether it's Krishna, or whether it's Allah, or whether it's Jehovah, or whatever, God's laughing, because he said, I'm none of those, and I'm all of them. You can call me whatever you want, it doesn't change what I am. You know, if I take a book and I hold it up and I say, this is a book, and everyone goes, yeah, yeah, and then I pull it up and I say, no, this is a cat. Whatever you call it doesn't change what it is. Okay, we're the only beings that seem to be so preoccupied with, you know, what our name is, and that's to do with our ego. We have an ego for a purpose, and that's part of the process of why we're here. The process of being here is to experience, end of story, just to experience, is our higher consciousness. And if we understand there is only oneness, there is only the collective consciousness, there is only the source, there is only the singularity, the void, whatever you want to call it, it is a point, an infinite point of nothingness, an infinite point of consciousness. So it's all things and no things at the same time. And for it to truly know what it was, it needs a mirror. You know, you don't know what you look like until you look in a mirror. And once you've looked in a mirror, you go, oh, that's what I look like. Okay? Until that time, you have no understanding of what you look like. You don't know what you sound like until you record yourself and play yourself back. And anybody who's done that will tell you, oh, it doesn't sound anything like me. And everyone says, no, that's what you sound like. So our mirrors are not always complete. For instance, what we see in a mirror is a mirror image, not a photograph. And if you actually hold up a photograph of yourself while you look in the mirror, the two images are totally different. So what we see is often a reflection of everything that we're not rather than everything that we are. So we need some sort of feedback system, some sort of mechanism by which we can know ourselves. And this is what Source decided to do. It said, I need a mechanism by which I can truly know myself. So it created the absence of itself. And in doing that, created a process of fragmentation. And we are just a very small fragment of that consciousness. Like if I take a drop of water out of the ocean, it's still part of the ocean unless it chooses to think it's not. Okay? But it's a fragment of the whole. And what it's doing is it's choosing to experience itself through these contrasts, through these absences of itself. So the purpose of our life is to experience stuff so that we can become aware of our consciousness. And we're doing that from a higher level down. We're coming down to say, I'm going to choose to experience things in the mirror because that will enrich my true knowing of myself because I'll have experienced it rather than just known it. What's the point to all of this life? And it's really simply answered. Why do you go to watch a movie? To be entertained. That's exactly what it is. Or you might go to a documentary to be informed. So the whole purpose of life is to find out more about yourself and to be entertained. You don't actually have to do anything. Okay? Things will happen along the way, the same way as in a movie things happen, but you don't have to do anything. The script's already written so that it will happen to you. So why are we here? We are here to experience the third dimension. The third dimension is slowed down energy. Everything comes from Source. Source is the highest vibration and all vibrations. But it started with the highest form. And then it starts to slow itself down. So as you come down through dimensional levels, and they're like, look, it's like a train track going from one place to another. There are train stops along the way which will have labels, but everywhere is continuous. So there's no fifth dimension and then a break and then fourth dimension and then third. It's like coming down through visible light. You know, if you look at a rainbow, you can't really say where red becomes orange, becomes yellow, becomes green and blue. It's a continuous shift and change. So this vibrational frequency coming down gets to a point where the more it slows down, it becomes light. And then from light, it slows down, eventually becomes sound. And from sound, it slows down and eventually becomes matter. So matter is slowed down sound in this spectrum. So the third dimension is the lowest form of vibration. Okay, and there are subsonic aspects of sound below which we can't hear and we can't see, and subsonic aspects of matter, but they're considered the third dimension. And the third dimension is the highest forms of density and the lowest forms of vibration in terms of this whole field. So it's a way of slowing down things. And if you think about it, if somebody's talking to you really fast and you can't understand them, you say, slow down, slow down. And as they slow down their words, you get a greater understanding. So the third dimension is Source's way of getting a greater understanding of who it is by slowing down everything to a point where you can actually understand more detail. Like in a film. If I run it through really fast, it all happens. But if I want a detail on a particular frame or something, I have to do it in slow motion so I can see the real detail. And I can slow it down and I can just pick one frame out and I can analyze that frame. That's all that Source is doing. Source is slowing things down into a third dimensional concept. And the core teaching is to love one another. Okay, that's the core teaching because it comes from the highest aspects. And all the highest aspects have come through, all the way through. They come through, love one another. But the minute you start ritualizing it, the minute you start controlling it with hierarchies of who can get to what and who can't, now you're bringing in fear. And it's using fear to control the masses. If you don't do this, you'll go to hell. If you don't do this, you'll get your head cut off. If you don't follow the laws exactly, you're going to go to hell, you're going to get stoned, you're going to do it. So now you're controlling people by fear, not by love. which is totally against the core aspect of all simple religions, which says to love one another. So all the stuff that's been added, which people say is the Word of God, is not the Word of God. It's the word of various people trying to put themselves up and control. And where does that come from? That's the Illuminati coming in and taking control and setting things up. And once you've created 2 or 3 religions, well, you can set them against one another. And that's why they created countries. Because now you can set countries against each other. And the thing is, the Illuminati create all the wars on the planet. And they've created them all since 1300. Okay? Because the Illuminati are the very first weapons merchants. They became so rich because of discoveries they made in the Crusades that they became richer than the state, richer than the church, and they were the power brokers in Europe. And they were the weapons manufacturers. So they sold weapons to everyone. And they're still doing it. The Illuminati supplied weapons to the Nazis and the Americans in the Second World War. And every single other war that you want to name, if you follow the paper trail, it all comes back to the same people were supplying weapons to both sides. So of course the more wars they are, the more money they make. And because they control the governments, what they do is they set the governments up against one another and they manufacture wars that aren't there so that they can continue to exploit the people, keep them controlled, because while they're fighting wars against one another, whether it's be religion or whatever it is, they can keep making money out of them and just exploit them. Exploit, 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 use, use, use. And that's why they think people are stupid. The greatest answer to that is define what God is first, and then I can tell you whether I believe in it or whether it exists. Because everyone has a totally different answer to that, of what God is. Some people see God as a separate being that is all-powerful, that they have to submit to. Some people don't even believe there's a God. And you say, well, how do you explain the whole universe and everything? They'll come up with science's explanation. And science's explanation is changing every 24 hours as they come up with new information. Science is something that continually proves itself wrong. That's what science is. And you only have to look at the history of science. 100 years ago, man couldn't fly. Impossible. Oh, now man can. More than that, we're going to the... But we can't fly to the moon. We can't leave the planet. Oh, we've done that too. Okay? Science continually proves itself wrong. And the more science goes down the track, the more they're realizing that what the spiritualists are saying is actually true. Because this universe does not exist in reality. It only exists in perceived reality. You know, you can watch a film. What you're watching now is just dots of light reflecting on your retina. I'm not real. I'm not real. I'm just dots of light. But if you perceive it to be real, then you will believe that I'm a real person telling you real things. But it's not. It's a perception. It's part of that choosing to experience. It's part of the illusion. The current Illuminati or the original Illuminati? Because there was, the name Illuminati originally came from being illuminated, i.e. aware, awakened of the truths of it. And as happens in all the time, power corrupts. And within that there are a group of people who wanted they had a better vision of the world. And they felt that the only way that they could do that was to control the people. But in doing that, the ultimate power corrupts everything. So they became controlling to the point where they believe that they're right and everyone else is wrong. Now, and they also are very much controlled by the Dracos in terms of their agendas. And they've worked their way through and they control every government, every major corporation, you name it, it's all controlled, and it all filters back to a handful of families. And it's all to do with the bloodline. So we're talking about the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the JP Morgans, the royal families of Egypt, royal families of Europe. They're all tied into this bloodline. And that bloodline happens to be reptilian. It's a reptilian bloodline. And that's why we're so aware of people like George Bush and the Queen and that being able to shapeshift. People have seen them doing these reptilian shifts and going, whoa, because they're of that bloodline. So they're controlling everything through fear. What's their agenda? Ultimately, their agenda is they want to get into the fifth dimension. But along the way, it's all about just control everything and keep the sheeple as sheeple. Ultimately, the Dracos are at the top of the tree. They've been around in this universe for about 4 or 5 billion years, and because they've been around that long, they think they own this universe. And they go from planet to planet like a locust. You know, they'll go there and they strip it of all of its resources. And if there's a population there, they just infest themselves until they control the population. And then they strip the planet of its resources. So they're like a plague of locusts that go around, and they believe they have a right to do all of this. So they can do whatever they want. And they've genetically engineered the human race as a Trojan horse to try to get into the upper realms. Because they're fear-based and they're reptilian, it's like the reptilian brain we have, which is about pure survival and control and manipulation and all of those things, survival of the fittest and all of that, and lacking in emotion. They don't have emotion. So they can't access higher realms. But because they want to control everything, they think, well, we can't have a dimension in this universe that we can't control. So we have to control it. We have to invade it. We have to do what we do. So that's their agenda. It's not right or wrong. It's just that's their way of thinking. You know, we say when we see a snake attack a rabbit and kill it, the snake's not doing anything evil. It's just doing what a snake does. So the Dracos aren't evil. That's a judgment that people put on them. Okay, they're not evil. They're just doing what they do. And they're fulfilling the role of being the fear-based thing for the third dimension. They're playing out the bad guy that we need to experience stuff in the third dimension. Because if we didn't have that, there would be no third dimension. We'd all be in fifth dimension going, isn't everything wonderful? Their physical form and spiritual form, because they're lower fourth dimensions, which means they can be in third dimension, lower fourth dimension. So they're capable of shape-shifting. So there will be a physical reptilian form, but they will look to you as if they're human. They can also, their consciousness can oversee a physical human form, like a shadow. Okay, so see, we get so locked into thinking that our human body is solid. And science tells us it's not. It's 99.9% space. Okay, but we perceive it solid because of our own filters. So therefore it's quite possible for another entity to exist in the same space that you exist. And if your switches are switched on, then they can control you through those, like a remote control. But if you flick those switches off, they can't control you. In order to switch off the DNA, because within your DNA you've got all sorts of different switches, and it's like a giant airplane cockpit. They're everywhere. You know, some of them are the thrusters, some of them are the navigators, some of them is a fuel gauge to see how much energy you've got. They've all got a purpose. And some of those switches are reptilian, that says, well, we're going to totally control everything through the reptilian switches. So the way to do it is you do a visualization, a meditation, whatever it is you want to do, and you go in there and you physically find those switches and you flick them off. You turn them off. And once they're turned off, they can't activate. If you want to, you can rip the whole wiring out. Whatever you want to do to deactivate that, you can. And then you can look around and you can find the aspects of your higher self. You know, they might be over here glowing in gold, and you flick them on and turn them on full. so that you allow yourself to be in a full level of awareness. Because it's all there. You can do whatever you want. It's your cockpit. If we had a whole lot of 9-foot tall reptilians walking around the planet, people would freak out. Okay? So what better way to control the masses than to have an organisation of hybrid forms that appear to be human but are totally controlled by you, or you're part of their running their agenda, and they do all the dirty work for you under the guise of being good. See, we have a United Nations, and the United Nations is a Drakos-run organisation. But if you tell the people they're doing good things, and you publicise, and this is where controlling the media helps as well, if you publicise all of the good things that you do here, while at the same time you're totally ripping the shit out of everything down here, people only see that. Because very few people will dig deeper to find out what's really going on. Very few people have dug deep to understand that the AIDS virus and Ebola virus and swine flus and all these things were actually created by these people. And it's documented. It's documented that the World Health Organization, which is an offshoot of the United Nations, they created these viruses for a purpose, to pull the population down. They have an agenda to bring the world population down. But most people don't dig any deeper. They lead superficial lives. People just have to dig around for themselves. You know, go onto YouTube. Take everything with a pinch of salt. You know, don't believe everything that you see, everything you hear, but importantly, don't disbelieve it either. Run it through your own filters. And you know, there's a simple thing. If it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, and it walks like a duck, it's probably a duck. You know, the most simple answer is usually the most appropriate one. So the more that you're seeing bullshit and the more your stuff doesn't seem to add up, go deeper. There'll be a reason behind it, why somebody's trying to hide something. And often it's not what people tell you, it's what they don't tell you. And this is where NASA is brilliant, because NASA, you know, will tell you some things, but then they won't tell. Give you an image of a single-celled organism compared to the whole planet. That the single-celled organism is really only aware of its immediate environment. Well, we're the single-celled organism. And in fact, we're not even the single-celled organism, because our Earth is a consciousness. The same way that we think that our body is we're one consciousness. But every single cell in our body is an individual organism. It can function on its own. It has mitochondria and all these things in it. It's a separate consciousness. That's why you can take the heart out of something and it keeps beating, because it's still got a consciousness about it, and parts of the body will still move. They have this residual consciousness. But over the top of that, we have an imposed consciousness of ourself. Okay, so we control all of these individual things. We're the head of it all. Well, Gaia, Earth consciousness, is the same. It controls all the consciousnesses on the planet. And the Sun, because the Sun is 99% of the mass in our solar system, it is the overseeing consciousness that controls all the planets and all the things in our solar system. Well, our solar system is a blip in the Milky Way galaxy. And the Milky Way galaxy has a consciousness that oversees all of the solar systems in our Milky Way galaxy. And our Milky Way galaxy is part of a local cluster of galaxies which has a consciousness. And that local cluster has a consciousness. And that local cluster is part of an even bigger and bigger and bigger. So where does it all end? Specifically relevant to us, there is a galactic federation, for want of a better term, which is a group of 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th dimensional existences who oversee what happens in this galaxy. And the overriding rule is that free will must apply. that no one is allowed to interfere with the free will of any being. Everyone is allowed to express whatever they want to express. That does not negate cause and effect. Okay, if you jump in a fire, you get burnt, cause and effect. If you kill someone, someone may retaliate against you. You know, there's cause and effect. If you break your arm because you do things, there's cause and effect. But it's not right or wrong. The higher consciousnesses have this guardianship to ensure that free will happens. But they understand, for instance, that the Drakos are playing the role they have to play as the bad guy, because we see ourselves as a good guy, and so they allow that to happen. It's more, the galactic federations are more funnels of consciousness. Does that make sense? That the information funnels in oneness. So even though it's oneness, there are levels of perception that you can choose to see things. Okay, sorry, I'm just getting images coming through. You can stand and look out of the window of the first floor of a skyscraper and you will see certain things. You can take the elevator up to the 10th floor and now you can see more. You can go right to the very top and you can see everything. So your perception will change, and what you can see and be aware of changes depending on where you shift your perception to. And all of these different dimensional levels and the federations are all levels of perception. And they allow the play to unfold at different levels. It's like a play within a play within a play within a play within a play. And it's all allowed to unfold at that dimensional level. And we've seen films of plays within plays. Well, that's a level upon a level upon a level. What was the one? Inception? Perfect example of how things work at those dimensional levels. Most definitely. Look, this is a really exciting time to be here. Some of these beings, they merely just have to think and they're here, because time-space does not exist to them once you get to those dimensional levels of existence. Some beings, though, are still in three-dimensional form and fourth and fifth dimensional form. That's why we have solid UFOs and we have light ships. There's difference. Some are three-dimensional, some are fifth-dimensional means of transport. So the more the light ships, for instance, they need to travel at the speed of light, and the other ships, they use different physics to get here. So some of the beings who have a vested interest in what's happening on the planet or is about to happen, this is a really exciting time to be here. Okay, this is a very exciting time, not because of what's going to happen to the planet per se, because that happens fairly regularly, it's no big deal. But what is a big deal is the shift of consciousness that's happening. That's really interesting to watch. And they want to make sure that this human consciousness, which has been a byproduct of this hybridization, okay, the consciousness that you and I have is a hybridized form. So it's created something quite extraordinary and new. Emotions. Emotions that can generate music, can generate literature, can generate art. This is new. This is why the human race is something quite extraordinary, because there's the detrimental aspects of emotions, but there's also this other amazing stuff. So they want to come through because this is exciting, but they want to be careful that they don't allow a virus in that can affect all of these other things. So there's very much a possibility that the human race will be admitted to the next dimensional level, but with conditions, like a quarantine parole period, to see whether, you know, it's like border control. Well, let's let them in, but let's keep them isolated to see whether there's any infection, cross-infection goes on, or is it going to be all purely good? Well, that's what everyone's caught up with. They've got caught up with this idea that we have to ascend to fifth dimension. And the perspective is to understand you're all dimensions. Because if you're oneness, there is only one spectrum and it's all connected. But it depends on where you choose to view it from. Now, people who are choosing to think that they're this drop of water separated from the ocean, will then think they have to make a journey back to the ocean, not understanding that they have all of the contents of the ocean in them. You know, I can say to someone, okay, they're giving me an image. Let's say we've got the ocean and the ocean is God, which is all dimensions. And then I take a massive bathtub load of water out of it. And I go, okay, that's seventh dimension. And then I take a small bucket and I take a bucket out of the tub and I go, okay, there's fifth dimension. And then I take an eyedropper and I take a drop of water out of the bucket or out of the cup and I go, okay, there's third dimension. See, they're all part of the one, but it all degrees on where your perspective of separation is. So fifth dimension, you can't ascend to the fifth dimension because you already are fifth dimension. You're already seventh dimension. You're already 10th dimension. You can be whatever dimension you think to create. You can create 1 billion dimensions if you want. And they all exist if you create them, because that's what Source is doing. Just pure thought. So it creates, you know, fractals? How you just keep going in and keep going in and keep going in and keep going in, and they just keep repeating over and over and over and over and over and over again. It's not bad at all, it's essential. Because it's the very first thing that Source did. Is it separated from itself to create the absence of itself, so it had a mirror and a duality. It's the absolute essential mirror, separation. But it doesn't mean you have to stay there. It just means at the maximum point of separation, you have the maximum amount of conflict. Therefore, you have the greatest scope for experience. Separation is neither bad nor good. But the function of separation is to give you the maximum experience of not being connected to love. See, if you say to Source, I want to be rich, Source says, okay, I'll make you poor first. Because you need to know what it's like to be poor before you can appreciate what rich is. Oh, I need to know what it is to be healthy. Okay, well, we need to make you unhealthy first so that you have a contrast. Because if you don't have a contrast, you have nothing to compare it to. You don't know what healthy is. You don't know what happy is. You don't know any of these things until you've had the contrast. Well, the more separation you create, the greater appreciation you have for what it is to be totally in oneness. But it's that separation that creates all of the scale of level of experience. It's just an enrichment. So when people are totally separated, they're at the maximum level of conflict, maximum level of fear, maximum level of experience. They'll get sick of it eventually, which is exactly what happens to people. They get sick of it and bored with it, and they want to come back to be happy. I don't want separation. I want us all to be one. Because they're now bored with that. But because now they can have a full appreciation of this. There is no evolution. Probably, if you're going to use a word close to that, it's devolution, because you devolve down to the third dimension to experience. It's like a yo-yo, down and then back up again. And then on the way back up, you absorb all the experience and you plug it into the computer. So it all gets fed back up in again. From the consciousness perspective, look, we don't evolve. Evolution implies linear time. Okay? And there is no linear time. Everything is simultaneous. And if everything is simultaneous, there can be no evolution. Does that make sense? Okay? Everything just is. This moment is only connected to the moment that just passed because you choose to perceive it is. If I shoot a film 24 frames a second, okay, this frame is only connected to the one that follows it because they've been put in a line. If I chop them all up individually and put them in the can, every single frame is there. Independent. They're not connected at all. It's only if you choose to connect them that you can get a film. But let's say I randomly put all of those images back together and I play them through the film. Every single image is still there, but now they're random. And now it doesn't seem to make any sense. Doesn't seem to make any sense unless you have a higher perspective that can see that all of those frames are independent. The current public perception is of a date, December 21st, 2012, of the people who are aware of that date. So when you say 2012 to people, most people say, oh, that's supposed to be the end of the world. That's sort of the general layman person. The people who are slightly more informed will talk about Revelations, the end of the world. They'll know the date, December 21st, 2012. And then you get into the spiritual people who talk about it being, it's a point of ascension. So they all have a perspective based on a date. The date itself is a fallacy, doesn't exist. And it comes from a paganism aspect, which is about the winter solstice date. And it actually has no relevance whatsoever. It's been plucked out of the air. It's not in the Mayan calendar. It's called desensitization. Is the more that you play these images to people, the more people get desensitized to it. So whenever earth changes start to happen, and you tell them it's just some other reason, they're desensitized to the real reason, so therefore they don't notice it. The truth is that there is a brown dwarf that has an orbit around our sun. It's been part of the binary system of our sun since its very formation. Has a number of planets around it. And it's coming through in a very close path with our Earth. And that close path is in September this year, 2 months away from where we are now. And it will cause massive Earth changes. It will break down our protective shield. We will be bombarded with cosmic radiation, earthquakes on a scale that you can't even comprehend, wildfires. The surface temperature of the planet will go up to 60 degrees, probably even more. All the volcanoes will erupt, ones that have been dormant for however many years. Tidal surges, tidal waves. The moon will get pulled out of its orbit. The Earth will get pulled out of its orbit. We will go through an asteroid tail that's being pulled in behind it. We're talking about massive global geographic changes that happen on a regular basis on this planet. It's not that is the physical thing that's going to happen, and it is happening in the next. Look, the Illuminati are preparing massive underground bunkers where they can house millions of people as their servants to do things, and their own family. A lot of those underground bunkers are actually going to be compromised, filled full of water, earth, they won't be able to get. They're actually building tombs for themselves, but their arrogance makes them think that they're going to be able to survive it. The reality is that they think that even the highest parts of them, the highest ones in the Illuminati, are going to be taken off planet by their reptilian keepers. They're not going, the reptilians lie to them all the time, so they've given them false promises. Those that do survive, some are going to have a shift. But those that do survive, their fears will keep them at third dimension. The rest of us will be operating at fifth dimensional level because we'll have gone through and prepared for this ascension, for this energy surge that will go on. So there will be a heaven on earth and a hell on earth that is talked about. The hell on earth will be at the third dimensional level. And the fifth dimensional level will be the heaven on earth. Exactly the same space, but just different dimensional vibrational stuff. We won't be affected by all of the crap that's going on. Ego has an important function in our third dimensional existence, and it's to process the moment. Without an ego, we don't know that red is red, we don't know that hot is cold, we don't know what emotions we're feeling. We need an ego to be able to process those experiences. But the ego is only meant to process the present. It's not to then start going into the past and taking events that are not related. You know, that frame is not related to any other frames. So the ego is not supposed to go back and say, oh look, this happened before, therefore I'm going to project it forward that will happen again. Because the minute the ego starts getting out of the present moment and starts to get into linearity, it starts to get caught up in fear. So what we have to say to our ego is that we have this really important role. You have an amazing role. You have to be so focused in the present that I can become totally aware of everything that's going on around me. And when you do that, I can make the most amazing films. And the ego goes, really? Really? And now it feels empowered because it knows what its job is, and it knows if it deviates from that, it affects the function. It stops me from operating at my maximum. So all of these people that talk about suppressing their ego and eliminating their ego, the ego just fights. It says, no, I've got a job to do, I've got a job to do, and it won't go away. So now they're in battle with their own ego. You know, your higher self creates this ego as your processor so that you can comprehend the experiences you're having. It's like the filter and the absorber all at once. It's sort of there. It's really important. But if you allow it to do more beyond that, now it's going to start pulling you into fear-based linearities. Whereas if you can stay totally in the moment, allowing your ego to fulfill its function of absorbing everything, every sound, every light experience, then you can stay at your 5th level of awareness or more all the time because you're not being run by fear. And then the Dracos agenda just doesn't run through you. Well, the greatest thing to do is acknowledge that your higher self has actually chosen to be a part of this, to experience this, to experience the fear, and then to get through the fear. You know, you can't confront a fear by pushing it under the carpet and hoping it'll go away. You know, your fears are like a pack of hungry wolves. Eventually they're going to hunt you down and rip you to shreds. But if you stand up and you start running at that pack of wolves, they bolt because they're so scared that you're running at them. It's like a lion. If you run away from a lion, it's going to instinctively chase you. But if you run towards a lion, it backs off because it feels threatened. And that's what your fears are like. They're there for you to experience this. So by all means, go through, be terrified, horrified. It couldn't possibly be true. Denial, denial, fear, fear, fear. And then get through it and start to see the exciting aspect of it. Don't be attached to all the materialist things that are going on. Let go of them. Sell your house. Sell your property. You've got a month to do it. If you can, do it. And don't try to get market value for it. Don't be greedy. Sell it for a bargain. And you'll get a 1-week settlement. And then you can use that money to prepare if you want to prepare to be a part of the future. Because there are some people who will be a part of the future. A lot of people said, well, what's the point? If we're all going to die, what's the point? Well, the point is we're not all going to die. The point is some of us are going to survive with an awakened level of consciousness and be the beginnings of an extraordinary time on this planet. Well, I want to be part of that. That sounds amazing. The most important preparation for people to make is in their heart, which means they have to get out of their head, because your head will just propagate fears. So you have to get out of your head and get into your heart and allow your heart to be the ruler and say to the head, what do I need to do to prepare? It's not the head saying, what do I need to do, and the heart having to adjust. You go into your heart, a state of being, a state of love, and you say, right, I know what I'm here to do, I know what I'm meant to be, da-da-da-da-da. What do I need to do physically to prepare for that? And it will tell you to find somewhere safe, to plan ahead, you might find a support group, a survival group, etc., who are all like-minded. So the most important thing is to let go of all attachments, because all attachments are based in fear. Oh, I'm fearful I'm going to lose my car. I'm fearful I'm going to lose my job. I'm fearful I'm going to lose my partner. So we're attached emotionally to these things, and we have to just let it all go and just be in our heart, be in a state of love, and then follow our own guidance. And some people will be told that they need to prepare. But not to prepare out of fear of what's going to happen, but to prepare for what happens after these events. There are the higher dimensional aspects and beings who are going to be there to guide us through. That's if you are of human consciousness. See, the star racers who are here will just go back to their dimensional consciousness. That's why so many of the light workers think nothing's going to happen, it's just going to be a smooth transition. Well, it will be for them. They'll just leave their body. But the human consciousnesses won't. And that's why I say to people, just go in. Just make a decision. Have you come here from a star system? Have you all your life been connected to some sort of star race, whatever it may be, and always felt that you came from the stars and you're here for a reason, and you've been doing the sort of work to help people? Or do you feel that that's something that you're aspiring to do, that you're wanting to leave the earth, that you feel like you've achieved everything you need to do here and you're ready to embark on a journey beyond that? Because you'll be one or the other. No one is better than the other. This is the great thing. In the eyes of Source, no one is better than anyone else. Everyone plays their part in a film. You're a filmmaker. You know the person who holds the sound is just as important as the person who runs the camera. It's just as important as the director. It's just as important as the extra in the background drinking a cup of coffee. We all have different responsibilities, but we are all integral into the success of that film. And if one of us doesn't play our part right, the film is incomplete or doesn't function properly. And that's how Source sees everything. No ego. It's extraordinary. There's free energy. All the energy is based on magnetics, and it's all free. There's amazing creativity. There's a credible sense of community and love. There's no partnerships anymore. People are just part of the community. There's love. Children are looked after by everyone. It's an extraordinary time. It's everything that humanity aspires to be. And we're going to be helped rebuilding. You know, these fifth dimensional beings are going to help us rebuild. And we're also going to be able to manifest whatever we want. They're going to teach us and educate us how to fully use our powers of manifestation. It's an extraordinary time for the human consciousness. I'm not part of the human consciousness. I just happen to be in a human body. And there are other people like that as well. And we're here to help that human consciousness get through this. Why would you not want to be part of that? Why would you allow your fear to say, oh, well, I hope I'm one of the first who dies when it happens? And that's okay. If that's what your journey is, then that's what you can do. But what about your children? Why are you making a decision for them? Well, maybe they made the decision to come in to not have the decision. But everybody's fear will be pulled to the surface, because that's the only way you can deal with it. Everybody's fear will be pulled to the surface so they can deal with it. 99.9% of the population will stick their head in the sand and hope the whole thing will go away. But we know what happens when you get your head stuck in the sand, your ass is stuck in the air, and someone's going to come along and go... But we had to have that separation first for us to truly appreciate what that's going to be like. If we go into it and we don't know anything different, we don't have gratitude and appreciation for it. So we had to have had all of these shit times with all the separation and all the greed and the self-service and all that sort of stuff for us to truly appreciate what we're going to rebuild. This has been an important part of the process in the film. Where are we in the film? We're coming up to the final turning point, where everything starts to go absolutely haywire. The final turning point. This is the height point of the drama we're coming up to. And as a filmmaker, that's, you know, you structure everything around that. You've got to write a really brilliant opening to a film. And your best writing is at the end, because you have to tie everything in together. But your most creative aspect is that turning point. And that's where the most drama is that turning point. And that's where we are now.